Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Shemo Polot here. So last week I did a video on pivot tables and it was very introductory version of it. This week I want to do a step higher, a little more advanced. I just want to show you a little more of the nitty-gritties that you can do to customize your pivot tables and summarize your information. So let's get into it. Okay, so really quickly I'm just going to do what I did in the beginning of the other video really quickly just to catch up. But also last week I forgot to link this workbook that I'm using so you can follow along. I apologize for that. So I'm going to link this workbook in the description just so you can access the data set and follow along. Otherwise, what's even better is if you just learn what I'm doing and then work on something that's actually relevant to you in real time. So maybe some information from your business and stuff like that. Otherwise, let's get into it. Okay, so first thing, you have a data set. We're going to do the basic from last time again, which is total sales by area. First thing we do, we've already made sure that there are no spaces within our data. We've made sure that every column has a unique name, and we make sure there are no subtotals within the text. And now we are ready to create our pivot table. The fourth thing that I want us to do is convert the data to a special Excel table by using Control T. I press Control T, that little box opens up, and what it shows in this space is just the range of our table A2 to R52. As you can see, it's A to R and it's down to 52. Also just looking at the crawling ants and the area they sort of cover shows you the dimensions of our table. I leave table headers checked because again, Excel recognizes that there are some headers in the text. After that, I click OK. Our table is created. Again, I don't like having a very colorful table, so I go to clear, just to clear that. One thing I didn't do before that I recommend you do is in this top right corner here, there's a table name. You can give the table a name. And that's just good because it helps you identify the table later on. And I'll explain what that means in the future. But I changed it to that. I click enter. And now we can insert our pivot table. We go to insert, we go to pivot table, and now you can see the table range is sales T, which is the name that I gave it. So one of the cool things about this is, so every time I update table sales D with new information, our pivot tables update with that information automatically. That's one of the reasons why it's really cool to use special Excel tables, and naming it is an added advantage so you can recognize the table, especially if you add multiple tables into your Excel workbook. Then knowing exactly which tables you're talking about is really helpful. So then I click OK. And now a new window opens up with our pivot table right here. There we go. Again, mine is going really slowly on this computer, but bear with me. So yeah, as you know, I have the information displayed in the pivot table fields box displayed side by side. You can change the view here. I hope for side by side because I think it looks better. Then we have these 4 boxes, and last time I maybe didn't do a good job of explaining what the different 4 boxes are specifically, so let me do that. So the filters will be a way for you to use any one of these fields as a filter for the data. It has to be a field that makes sense. So for example, the area, if you want to see what the sales look like in different areas, then it would make sense to put the area field inside filters. And we're going to do that just so I can show you what that looks like. Columns is if you want the data to be displayed in columns, then you will drag whatever you want there. Again, usually it depends on what you want to see there. The rows box, we saw what happens. You have your categories displayed in rows within your pivot table. And values is where you put all the numerical information. The salary information, the quantities, the number of units, things like that. Everything like that goes inside the values box. Okay, so we start with total sales by area. Get total sales, drag them to values. We get area, we drag them to rows because we want the areas to be in rows like this. Okay, now if you click outside the pivot table, this pivot table fields window closes. You just need to click back in the pivot table and it appears. However, if it doesn't appear, which can happen sometimes, you go up here on this toolbar, you go to pivot table analyze, and you click field list, like that. Clicking it and unclicking it will make it disappear or appear. So just a note of that. Now, from this point in time, I think maybe this is where we stopped. Now, incrementally, I told you, yes, last time I did mention that you can change the summary category by going to sum of total sales inside the values box, clicking value field settings, and then you can change your summary. As you can see, summarize values by, you can change it to average, you can change it to count if that makes sense, but average and sum are probably the most sensible ones in this case. And then at which point you can click OK. The next thing that we want to talk about now is the format of the information here. Right-clicking is a very powerful tool in pivot tables and really in all of computer usage. You know what they say, if you're in doubt, right-click. So when you click inside the pivot table and you right-click, it gives you very many options which are very useful to you. As you can see, the value field settings are here, so you can also change from average to sum that way, like that. Another thing is you can also do it here, summarize values by, sum, count, average, again, multiple options. And then, but if you want to change the format of the numbers, you want to add commas, you want to add decimal places, things like that, then you go to number format. Don't go to format cells, because format cells will just change the underlying cell. Number format will change the actual numbers inside the pivot table, okay? So we click number format, and then this window will open up sometime this year whenever my computer decides to do that. Just give it a second. But yeah, so changing the number format, we're going to try and maybe change the decimal places, maybe add 1,000 operators to just make our digits look like money, because we're dealing with money here. There we go. And so let me do currency. Let me leave it as dollars. Yeah, and let me click OK, like that. And I decided to leave the decimal places in there. But yeah, that's what that looks like. So now, even if you right click and you change the summary to average, the numbers will still remain in that formatting, okay, which might not be the case if the range expands and you had chosen format cells. Okay, but let me go back to sum, just because I like the way the figures look. Okay, so the next thing that you can do is, while inside this pivot table field, what if you wanted to add a second column that expresses the sum of total sales as a percentage, okay? Really cool. You can do that. So what we would have to do is go to total sales and drag it down to values a second time, okay? And this time, we will right-click from here, and again, we can right-click from here or we can change it in value field settings. You just have to make sure that you select the right one. The one on top is the first one, the one below is the second column, okay? So you can either change it here by clicking that downward arrow and going to value field settings here, or you can right-click, and then what we want to show values as, and I want to go to percentage of grand total, right? So now here we're able to see that the West region has the lion's share of sales. By percentage, 28% of the sales come from the West region, or West area, or West branch, whatever you want to call it. And then, so now we can change this to sales percent, like that. But yeah, so that's another thing that you can do, is you can add a column for summarizing as a percentage. And again, you can look at all the options here, right? Percentage of grand total, percentage of column total, percentage of row total. Although most of these I don't recommend you use if you don't understand how the math works. Most of it isn't really relevant to you, to the average person. Maybe percentage difference from, if you want to look at the percentage difference from year to year, that might be helpful. But otherwise, for the most part, just go slow, okay? Go slow. And if you wanted, you could just do percentages and completely eliminate this first column, okay? Then, another thing that I want to talk about is the design of the pivot table. Once you're in the pivot table and you go up to design in the toolbar, there are a bunch of options here. So as your data gets more complex, so if you add more information to the pivot table, so for example, if I get total items sold, like that, if I drop them in there, I got total items sold and I put them in rows, okay? That is able to show me different items sold in the different branches and the specific amount of money that was got from them, like that, okay? And if you don't want to see those, you can just collapse those by doing that, okay? And it takes our table back to what it looked like originally. But the point I'm trying to show you now is, I have to make sure I click that plus sign. There, okay, so you can change the way your table looks, okay, by going to design. You can decide if you want to include subtotals, and the subtotals are here, these subtotals. All right, so you can decide if you want to include them as well as this grand total. You can decide if you want to include it or not, and you can just change those by coming up to design. And here in subtotals, do not show subtotals, show all subtotals at the bottom of group, show all subtotals at the top of group. Grand totals, you can do off for rows and columns. So for example, if I click that, all the grand totals will go off, as you can see. Right, as you can see there, all the grand totals have vanished. I'm just going to put them back on. There you go, and you can see it's right back. And then for report layout, there are different layouts that the table uses to display the information. Repeat all items, do not repeat items. That refers to when you have, say, a branch column and it's just west and then a space. It's just say south, a space, and then west, and you can have them repeating south multiple times in each cell. But in this case, for report layout, I always recommend you just use outline form. Show in outline form. Just because it does a better job of labeling the pivot table for you automatically. And as you can see, I think it looks a lot better. You can also change the colors of your pivot table up here, as you can see. If you want to get really fancy with it, you can choose whatever colors you want. I'm very much a less is more person, so even after creating my pivot tables, I usually end up just removing everything and making them look as plain as possible. But for now, let me just leave it like that. Okay, so then the other thing, remember I talked about the filter box, okay? So in the filter box, what we're going to do, I'm going to move these items out from here. Let me take these out. So to items sold. Okay, so now I want to put salesperson in rows. Okay, so now we have the salespeople and the sum of their total sales. There are 50 salespeople, so it's a pretty long table. But what is really cool will be to figure out to filter this table based on the area. Okay, so we can get the area. Again, think of the area like a branch for my UG people. But yeah, so if I drop area in filters, right, this sort of filter row appears at the top of our pivot table. And so when I click that drop down arrow and I select multiple items, I can then come here and just click south if I only want to see the sales in south and north, for example, and it will filter it by those different salespeople. As you see, they have reduced to 27. So you can look at the specific people in a specific region and see how they performed. So what if I want to look at only one branch? Let me do just south alone. You see, now I have south, right? And so that's how you use the filter button. So again, it has to make sense. So you have to look for something that's able to lump up all the content together. Yeah, so using the filter box really depends on what kind of categories you have, what kind of fields of data you have. So area makes sense for obvious reasons because all your salespeople are attached to a specific area or branch. So filtering by area makes sense. So it will be the same if you also have different branches for your business, or if you have maybe employees categorized by a certain color or by a certain unique identifier, color, gender, things like that. So you may want to see how men are doing versus women, you may want to see how people in certain age groups are doing. So you can also filter it by age, things like that. So it really just depends. But you can't filter by a salary number. I mean, you could filter by a salary range, but why are you suffering? But yeah, okay, so the last thing that I want to show you before we go from this video is instead of using filters that way, and I want to just remove the area out of there, we can insert what we call a slicer, and a slicer does exactly the same thing as a filter. You go back to the toolbar, go to pivot table analyze, go to insert slicer, and then in the same way you select what filtering option you want. The slicer is basically a fancy filter. So I want to use area again, so I click area and I click OK, and this is what happens. Okay, and so now same thing, if I want to filter by the east, I click that. If I want to filter by north, I click that. If I want to filter by south, I click that. If I want to filter by west, I click that, and as you can see, the data is changing in real time. If you want to select multiple items at a go, I click that button that says multi-select. So now I can click east and west. I can even click north. So now the three of them are selected, as you can see, and as you can see, the data has grown. And to just unselect them, you just click them again, like that. And that's how slices are useful. Fantastic tool. Again, it's just a fancier filter, so make you look impressive. Now, similar to slicer, if your data has dates, and unfortunately ours doesn't, but if your data has dates, then you can also click inside the pivot table, and in pivot table you can insert a timeline. And now we can't create a timeline because, as you can see, we can't create a timeline for this one because it doesn't have a field formatted as a date. If there's a date, then you can insert a timeline, and the timeline does the same thing as the area, except it will filter by date, by time period. So if your data is from 2001 to 2010, you can look at data from 2000, data from 2003, same exact thing. So if you have data like that, then try using the timeline. But this video has gone a lot longer than I thought, so we're going to stop right there for now. Otherwise, yeah, that's just like slightly a little more than what we learned last time. But I hope this is really useful for you, and let me know in the comments below if you have any trouble understanding any of the concepts that I need to drill down in a bit more. And I'm going to link this workbook in there so you can practice along in real time. Otherwise, thank you for your time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Smash that like button, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.